The next area that I wanted to talk to you about was rhythm. And the rhythm, basically, I'm sure you've already dealt with rhythm, but rhythm, it's an important aspect of playing the flute. Rhythm is generated with a staccato style of play, okay? But that doesn't mean it has to be harsh, it doesn't mean it has to be loud, because there is such a thing as a slow rhythm. There's a fast rhythm, there's a hard rhythm, okay? But rhythms are basically, in the flute, are generated with your tongue. It's a very, very subtle technique. In the beginning, when I first started to play, it didn't sound very subtle, you know, it's more that tick, tick, tick. Okay? Now, what I found over the years, the more I play, the more subtle that tonguing becomes. And it has to be subtle, especially if you play on the low note. Because if you tongue that low note hard, it goes to the next octave. Okay, so you have to be subtle with it. So we have no choice but to be subtle with the tonguing. But the beauty of the tonguing is that it gives you a time to the song. Da 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 da. And the more subtle, the better. Now listen to the difference without the tonguing. Okay, both are valid, to play without tonguing, without rhythm, or to play, let the fingering, I should say, let the fingering create the rhythm, or allow the fingering and the tongue to do the rhythm. What it does, it takes the note and brings it again, as we talked about earlier, it brings it to its peak by tonguing, okay? And that generates the rhythm. Now, the aspect of rhythm you'll find is if you do a combination of both, of rhythmic tonguing and finger rhythm. If you heard the difference on the high notes, I tongued it. On the low notes, I just did the breathing and allowed the fingering to do the rhythms. So rhythms are important. But the armature that we talked about earlier in regards to the moisture control really plays a big aspect of creating a nice tonguing effect. When you can control the opening of the flute with your lips, your tongue, the amount of air, the bursts of air that go through become much more subtle and they become much more direct and controllable. So do create that armature. I know it may be a little uncomfortable at first because what happens is all of the habits that we've learned in the beginning when we first learned to play the flute, we tend to get stuck with those. And I don't mean stuck in a bad way. I mean, we just tend to do it automatically over and over again. So now when you have to make changes, you are going to have to be very conscious about making those changes whenever you play. But they're beneficial. And if you never use them, it's still a good thing to learn. It's just getting to know your instrument better and giving you a lot more flexibility in how to play. And the other aspect to that of rhythm is the vibrato. And I have to tell you, teaching vibrato has been like one of the hardest things for me to do. But finally, I spoke to a voice teacher, a vocal teacher, I should say. And she started to give me a couple of exercises in terms of how she teaches, because vibrato it just comes from inside of you, okay? But the way she explained it to me was, it was very fascinating, is if you go ahead and put your hand in front of your mouth like this, and you go, the word ho, or ha. Now, while you're doing that, take your other hand and put it right at your diaphragm, right here, and just rest it there and then go. You'll notice it's moving. Your diaphragm is moving back and forth when you do that every time. Now, if you do that into the flute, continually, okay, first feel it, so you can do it very easily by just putting your hand in front of your mouth and put your hand in front so you can feel the diaphragm, okay? And then you'll feel it moving, da, 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 da. It just moves on you. When you do that into the flute and you first start to do it, what winds up happening is it becomes, it's kind of a harsh vibrato, but that's a good start. Just keep doing it. All of a sudden, one day you're going to go, wow, that was really subtle. I was able to do it. It just comes to you. What you're doing is you're getting your diaphragm and your mental process used to doing that into the flute. But start with that. And what will happen is, over a period of time, the vibrato becomes very subtle. You won't even be conscious of it, but it'll become so subtle that people will go, well, how do you do that? You know, how are you doing that fluttering in the sound? Because you become very unconscious of actually creating it, and the subtlety will become unconscious. In the beginning, what will happen is it's going to be much harsher. Okay? And don't get discouraged. Just continue to do that. Now, some of the things that I've seen that you want to avoid is to go. That's not a vibrato. What you're doing is you're blowing. Or I've seen where flute players will take the flute and go. And what they're doing is they're just moving the instrument. They're not creating a vibrato. It's a physical process with the instrument. What's very important is that we make sure that the vibrato is generated from the diaphragm, okay? All the other techniques in terms of creating other types of vibrato are fine, but you do want to practice the vibrato from the diaphragm. The reason I say that is because it's much more subtle. It has more of a subtlety to it that you're going to wind up using later on in many songs.